Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys.
The expensive banner plane graphics of the FAIRtax scrolling banner, one of the greatest inventions ever made. Not only is the FAIRtax simple, efficient, and visible, so is the scrolling banner. You can
Yes,
at fairtaxstore.com.
.org.
.org. The
Yes.
fairtax.org.
Note that I did not razz you this week about not taking that to a Wake Forest basketball game.
Let me tell you.
As you can see, I have gotten off of Nick Saban's private jet. I am now back at his home in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, inside the Bryant-Denny Stadium. This is a picture I actually took when I took the stadium tour down there when I was in Tuscaloosa a while back. So that works pretty well. But anyway, here we are. Last calendar day of 2024, New Year's Eve, and it is time to go through the 2024 tax proposal Hall of Shame. But before we do that, I'm actually going to look at some of the very last things that the Congress critters are trying to do to the tax code in this current Congress. So you can tell me if you think any of these deserve to be added to the Hall of Shame. But we'll start with H.R. 10328 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow taxpayers to designate overpayments of tax as contributions and to make additional contributions to the Homeless Veterans Assistance Fund and for other purposes.
Now, and so what you're telling me,
I say no comment on that.
thinking how I'm going to word this. I mean, we respect and the veterans deserve more than they get from the government in terms of service. I think every veteran should get, a few $100,000 cash, not taxed, on the way into their retirement. Because essentially, once you're in the military at some level, you're always vigilant for your country, and I would think that there should be we should give them as much as we can stand to give them. So now what they're doing, it looks like through this proposal, is allow us to contribute more of our tax dollars too, which I think is commendable. But hey, let's go ahead and appropriate out of Congress some money that'll make a real difference and make sure that we provide them with the most that we can possibly provide them.
If I'm reading this right, it says allow taxpayers to designate overpayments of tax, which means if you got a refund coming from the IRS, instead of taking it yourself, you can send it to this Homeless Veterans Assistance Fund if you so choose, which I guess is a, good choice for people to make. Let's keep going here. H.R. 10314 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish a National Resilience and Recovery Fund and for other purposes. I would suggest that if we had the fair tax, we would not need a National Resilience and Recovery Fund because the economy would boom to the extent that the money would just be flowing into the Treasury, and we would not need that. That is Melanie Stansbury of New Mexico proposing that one.
Yes.
Okay, H.R. 10308 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow for payments to certain individuals who dye fuel and for other purposes. We've seen this one before. This is Gwen Moore from Wisconsin.
Yes.
To allow payments to certain individuals who dye fuel. Remember that there's a very heavy tax on diesel fuel that's used, in over the road for trucking industry has to do that. But if you're a farmer that you need diesel fuel to run the equipment out of your field, that's not using the highway. So that fuel is not subject to the tax. And the way you have to tell them apart is that one has a dye in it and one has another one. So it's different color as to whether it's got the tax on it or not. And so they're now going to let people who dye the fuel, put different colors and different grades of fuel there. We'll get them certain payments from the Internal Revenue Code. How cool is that?
Yeah, I think farmers are out there making things happen. That's a tough business, tough vocation, farming.
Yeah, one more. S5442, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to remove, you may have to explain this to me because I don't know the differentiation between mead, 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 and low alcohol by volume wine for the purpose of tax imposed on wines. I don't drink wine. I know nothing about it, so I will defer to you to explain that one.
Well, I think you have to think about dry mead is a type of mead with little or no residual sweetness and a dry finish, so that the palate is, remarkably flavorful. Similar in flavor, body, and balance to a dry white wine, aroma, flavor, the feel in the mouth, etc. But what was the exact wording of that mead?
That's it. It was to remove the differentiation. Apparently, in the tax code, it says there's a differentiation between mead wine and low alcohol by volume wine. All this is for the purpose of tax imposed on wines. So I don't know what the mead and low alcohol by volume wine, what the difference is, but this bill wants to erase that difference as far for tax purposes.
Yeah.
That's that's the infamous Chuck Schumer from New York.
Well, the main difference between mead and low alcohol mead is the alcohol by volume, as you just said. Mead can range from 3.5% to 23%, while low alcohol mead is typically 3.5% to 7.5%.
Oh, I imagine Chuck Schumer consumes copious amounts of both, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Let's move on here. This is the last program of the calendar year. What I always look forward to, the 2024 tax proposal Hall of Shame. And I'm not sure that any of the ones that we just mentioned deserve to be listed, but let's go ahead and do this. This is just, I mean, some of the things in here are indeed shameful purposes. Some of the things in here are, what the heck is that doing in the tax code? And some of it is just funny and struck my funny bone, and that says, let's stick this in here. Let's start the first entry of the 2024 tax proposal Hall of Shame for this year. Was HR 7110 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to require building inspections for certain qualified low-income buildings. That just got to have a tax code that requires building inspections. Isn't that crazy?
Up to Adriano Espilier, a representative from New York, District 13.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? And of course, you have to couch all of what we're getting ready to go over here with why is it in the tax code? Why? Oh, why? And it helps us supplement the need for a tax on consumption, specifically HR 25, the fair tax, to eradicate us from all this silliness.
Well, this next one, of course, is a very, very narrowly targeted benefit, benefiting people that work in a particular state. And I will let you dig into that next one.
Coming in February of last year, Lisa Murkowski from Arkansas, a senator up there.
That's Alaska.
Alaska, yeah, Arkansas. I should have known. I don't know, but Alaska. S 3795, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide that the 50% limitation on the deduction for meal expenses does not apply to meals provided on certain fishing boats or at certain fishing processing facilities.
I don't think there are any fishing boats and fish processing facilities in Arkansas. So that's definitely, but there's a bunch of them up there in Alaska where Senator Bukowski is. And there it is. I guess they would call that bringing home the bacon. Trying to get really specific benefits just for your constituency. And apparently there's a provision in the Internal Revenue Code that has a 50% limitation on the deduction for meal expenses. I wonder if that would apply if you work on a cruise ship or something like that. But they're saying that meal expenses, they don't want that 50% limitation. They want the meal expenses on certain fishing boats at certain fish processing facilities to be unlimited. And I ought to go back and see if that bill actually passed this time or not. I don't know, but that's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Lisa Murkowski. Let's keep going. I thought this one was funny. To amend the internal, this is HR 7577, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to treat energy efficient kegs as efficient commercial building property for the purposes of energy efficient commercial building deduction. I'm thinking energy efficient kegs. Now, when I think the word keg, I think frat party, don't you?
Yeah, that's so I'm getting ready to look it up. We definitely we definitely want there to be and I'm sure it's something else, but that would be wonderful if you had energy efficient. Basically, kegs are more energy efficient than single use containers because they are reusable and recyclable, meaning, instead of going out and buying a six pack or a suitcase, you buy a keg and you're saving a carbon footprint, if you will, on the environment,
Okay.
reducing the need for new materials and energy intensive manufacturing. So there you go. Recyclable kegs.
So,
Good.
so they are going to be a commercial building property, the purposes of an energy efficient commercial building deductions.
Yeah.
We go through all these deductions and all these credits and all these exemptions and stuff that the tax code is just riddled with, picking winners and losers, doing favors for your friends, punishment to your enemies. This entire tax code needs to go away. We need to replace it with a fair tax. And this stuff in the 2024 tax proposal Hall of Shame is our primary ammunition for making that case. HR 7814 is the next one, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to exclude from gross income certain federally subsidized loan repayments for dental school faculty. And we have seen several of these. I mean, we could make, 5 pages of
Oh,
these proposals to exclude from gross income certain income for certain people that they get for them. We just put this one in there. That was the first one I think we ran across in the year, to exclude from income. So the income you get from a federally subsidized loan repayment if you are a dental school faculty member. That's Representative Fan Drew of New Jersey that proposed that one. But again, picking winners and losers, picking certain people getting breaks and others not. That needs to go away. We need to treat everybody the same with the fair tax.
that has that has some real bite to it, for the dental school. Yeah.
Indeed. Now, this next one is probably one of the most shameful purposes. This one's in the Hall of Shame because it's an incredibly shameful purpose. Go.
All right. We're looking at S 4017, Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to impose a tax on the net value of assets of a taxpayer. And
Yeah,
for
that
that,
that is the wealth tax. And
yeah.
that is where they want to tax you on the unrealized capital gains. If you have a stock that has gone up in value, but you haven't sold it yet, you have not actually realized the profit from that appreciation in value. Senator Warren's bill wants to tax you on that money that you haven't received. That is absolute. That ought to be unconstitutional. If that ever passes, I imagine that's going to end up before the Supreme Court.
Well,
But
it'll end economy and certain individuals, families and small businesses and all just wouldn't make it if
yeah,
something
but
like that were to pass. And I
but,
think,
but
like you said,
remember,
if it does get to the Supreme Court, it would be struck down, in my opinion. Yeah.
I would hope so. But then remember, we talked to Steve Hayes about the Moore case earlier in the year, where that was a case where some unrealized gain from investment in a foreign corporation was indeed upheld. The Supreme Court said you could do that. And of course, we talked to Steve Hayes about that. If you'd like to go back in the archive and look up that particular program, that in fact, if I'm remembering right, that was right in the middle of our series we did when we were going through the FAIRtax book chapter by chapter, and that decision came down while we were doing that, so we broke into that series to do that. But it's not, it should be. I mean, it ought to be unconstitutional to levy a tax on money that you haven't gotten yet. It exists only on paper. But that's what Senator Warren wants to do. Hopefully, excuse me, got this tickle in my throat. I've got to
Next
try to
one has
wash it down with cheerwine here.
the next one has that we're going over here is unique because of its wording. And when I read this, I'm going, really? There's something being introduced in the Congress to do this because of what
Yeah.
already existing.
Yes,
Uh,
this is a what in the heck is this doing in the tax code kind of thing.
Go ahead and read this one on out there if you've got a minute.
I do. It's HR 8578 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish the truck fleet retreaded tire tax credit. That's probably the craziest tax credit that we've ever seen in the tax code. The truck fleet retreaded tire tax credit to require federal agencies to consider the use of retreaded tires and for other purposes. I don't know about you, but I have been riding down the interstate behind one of these big 18 wheelers, and the retread came flying off of the tire and just about took off the front end of my car. If I wasn't such a fantastic driver and was able to dodge the debris and all the shrapnel that was flying at me, that would be a problem. But they want to use the tax code to force truck fleets, and I assume that means, private commercial truck fleets, not just government truck fleets, to
Yeah.
require federal agencies to consider the use, or maybe it says that's just federal agencies. Anyway, they want to force the use of retreaded tires and for other purposes. Now, I'm sorry, I don't think that's a good idea. That just about got me going down the interstate one time.
I think you have to look at the fact that you're going to offset costs from the purchase of good tires to the potential for disaster on the highway, especially with federal vehicles. If it ain't your vehicle, you're not going to take as good a care of it as if it were your own kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Requiring federal agencies to consider, not even to do it, but just to consider it, the use of retreaded tires. And that's a concern. You're okay. You're going to save money on the tire, getting a retread. And now you're going to put it on a car and you're going to drive it, or a truck, or whatever the vehicle is. And now you're going to drive it down the highway and drive it and drive it and drive it. Shorter life, and more opportunity for a wreck of some kind, because, like you just said, the tire tread comes off and flies up and causes more problems. So I think
Yeah.
in costs.
We need to keep going here so we don't run out of time. This is the next one is, oh mercy. This is class warfare in the tax code. Go.
All right, HR 9937 from Amelia Strong Sykes from Ohio District 13. Stop Predatory Investing Act, a predatory investment. To amend the Internal Revenue Code to deny interest and depreciation deductions for taxpayers owning 50 or more single family properties. Predatory?
Oh, yes, those
I'm,
evil rich landlords who own all this property that are just strangling people. That's crazy. That definitely goes in the Hall of Shame. Let's keep going. HR 10028 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to disallow the deduction of certain expenses, again relating to ownership of single family homes by specified large investors, to impose an excise tax on the sale of such homes by such investors, and to prohibit federal mortgage assistance relating to certain large investors. That is Representative Rokana of California. Now, I would think Representative Kana and Representative Sykes, they're kind of got together and are both doing the same thing with different bills. They're trying to stock it to the fat cats so they can go back and tell their constituency, I'm fighting for you and I'm fighting against the fat cats. But they don't realize the fat cats are the people who provide all the jobs to people in the rest of the economy. That's crazy.
It's a game. It's a game. It continues on. It happens throughout the decades. Good, bad, or indifferent. And it's a matter of a personal, one on one. It's the evil tendency of class warfare. When if you boil right down to it, you and I and everybody else in the world we're compassionate people. Human beings are compassionate people, and we're definitely going to be helping out our neighbor. You know, we're definitely going to be doing
Mhm.
as we go along.
Indeed. Well, we got about 8 minutes left and three more to go. I think we can get them all in here. So go ahead. Go ahead with the next one.
This has been in chronological order on the calendar. So now we're at one that was introduced in October, the end of October, HR 10041, the Little Act of 2024, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish the Child Care Provider Startup Credit to increase the amount of and make refundable the expenses for household and dependent care credit and for other purposes. If you don't throw and for other purposes in on your bill, uh, you're just missing out on an opportunity to cram other stuff in later. From
Yeah.
Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey District 5.
Again, the key word and the reason this one's in the Hall of Shame: credit, 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 credit. We have highlighted this all year long on FAIRtax Power Radio, how the Internal Revenue Code is just chock full of credits for this and credits for that. So they're trying to manipulate or trying to encourage certain behavior by giving them a tax credit. I'm sure they are trying to prevent other behaviors by putting tax penalties on that thing. So the Congress critters use the tax code as a method to try to exert as much control over our lives as they can by incentivizing you to make certain decisions or disincentivizing you to make other decisions. And they'll give you a tax credit for one and a tax penalty for the other. That manipulation of the American people, you should be free to make your own decisions about your own life, period, end of discussion. So all of this stuff that they are doing through the tax code to try to influence the way people behave needs to go away. We need to jerk that out by the roots. We need to replace it with the fair tax, and then we need to do it now. And hopefully the incoming administration that will take office in about 3 weeks will start to do that. And again, as we mentioned before, we hope that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk turn their attention to the Internal Revenue Service if they are looking for things in the government that operate inefficiently and wastefully that we need to get rid of.
Yes, absolutely. I think the conversations are going that way, and the population, the citizenry of our great United States of America are feeling the same thing, especially with the sustained inflation that we've had over the last number of years. Persistent, it seems to be sticking with us a lot longer than under a normal cycle. Next one on here is HR 10104, a second generation biofuel producer credit extension act of 2024 will amend the Internal Revenue Code to prevent a double benefit with respect to second generation biofuels under the Clean Fuel Production Credit and the Alcohol Fuel Credit, and to extend the application of alcohol fuels credit with respect to such biofuels.
Do you understand what you just read? I don't.
I turned it upside down before we went on the air and tried to read it backwards. Still couldn't get it. Still couldn't get it.
Oh, mercy. To amend the Internal Revenue Code to prevent a double benefit. Wow, heaven forbid that anybody gets a double benefit. With respect to the second generation biofuels under the Clean Fuel Production Credit, alcohol, it's stuff like this that makes the tax code just incomprehensible to
Yeah.
normal everyday people.
Well, the Internal Revenue Service is charged with the, but Congress writes the tax code. I'm concerned that after you get layer upon layer of to amend and change and focusing on one thing, that somewhere along the way it's going to cause a domino effect and topple other amendments and rules and regulations that are in the tax code and create a situation where they may be null and void at the end of the day.
It is. All right. Well, let's head out a turn forward, head for the checkered flag here on the 2024 Tax Proposal Hall of Shame. We mentioned this one just a couple of weeks ago. It was introduced on the 21st of November, just before Thanksgiving, by Representative Bob Good of Virginia. This is another case, and we decry this every time we see it, of political agenda pushing using the tax code. And again, both sides do it, the left more so than the right, but this is one on the right side that Representative Good has introduced H.R. 10195, the No Discrimination in Housing Act, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to disallow the low-income housing tax credit to taxpayers that have diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So he said, if you're one of these woke DEI folks, we're not going to give you the low-income housing tax credit. That is just wrong. You don't use the tax code to push a political agenda, whether you're pushing a conservative idea or a liberal idea. It's wrong on both sides. We just need to stop it, and the only way to stop it is to remove the way that they can do it, get rid of the tax code entirely, jerk it out by the roots, replace it with a fair tax, make taxation go back to the one and only original purpose for which it exists, and that is simply to raise the money that the government needs to operate. Quit trying to social engineer, quit pushing your political agenda, quit trying to manipulate people's decisions. That all is just not an appropriate use of the tax code, and it needs to go away, and that is it. The No Discrimination in Housing Act. Bob Good, I know you're a FAIRtax co-sponsor, but I'm going to call you out on this one. That one lands in the Hall of Shame for something you shouldn't be doing with the tax code.
That's right. That's right. The thing about all of this is that the tax code can get so encumbered by and under its own weight can fall into and grind to a halt under its own inertia, under its own dysfunction. So after a while, you just have to say, time out. Wait a minute. We've got to stop. This has got to stop. At some point, it gets so big, and I think we're there. We've been way past there, that we end up with a jumbled mess that nobody can figure out. And I think we've reached that point.
Indeed. Well, 1 year from now, at the end of 2025, we will be doing this again with the 2025 Tax Proposal Hall of Shame. And usually in the first year of a congressional session, the congressional sessions last 2 years, of course, but usually in the first year is when you get all the really cool stuff. So I expect next year's Tax Proposal Hall of Shame to have some really some doozies and some zingers in it, as the new Congress will get underway here in just a matter of a few weeks. And we will be watching them every week. Now, a little bit of a promotional note. I intend, hopefully we can pull this off, that the first program of the year, which is next week's program, we will have Steve Hayes with us. We like to get his annual State of the FAIRtax the message. And so I'm going to see if I can get a hold of him. And if we can have him with us here next week on FAIRtax Power Radio to discuss the state of the FAIRtax as 2025 breaks and we get a new congressional session. And again, hopefully for the first time in history, we have an incoming president who has expressed a desire to get rid of the income tax. His plan is to replace the revenue with tariffs. So hopefully we can steer. All right, you got the right idea. You just got the wrong way of implementing it. If we can steer him to get rid of the income tax in favor of the fair tax. So hopefully Steve will be talking next week about some opportunities that we in the FAIRtax movement have not had in quite some time. So that's going to do it. So happy New Year to you, my friend. We will see you next year in 2025 here on FAIRtax Power Radio. And thank you so much for listening and sharing and talking about FAIRtax Power Radio with your family and friends. We certainly appreciate it all, especially sharing the videos to your social media. But that's going to wrap it up for this year. We will see you again next year on FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you will demand it.
And roll tide in their bowl game tonight.
So what would you do for her?
We've got several programs that will help her. We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the fair tax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're going to give her back her taxes?
Every month, on everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.
Why?
Well, we believe taxes should be fair.